You know, there's a certain kind of movie that you watch one time and you think, I got it, I understand it, I like it, maybe I don't like it, but I don't need to watch it again. And then you finally do, and you realize it's a whole different movie and that you missed a lot of the point. And not because you didn't understand it, but because the filmmaker hid a lot of things in there deliberately. He built it around a truth and little points that you didn't see the first time, and he trusted you to come back and find them. Tonight, I have 10 films just like that, and I promise you, by the end of this video, you're gonna want to watch at least one or two of these again. So pop that tape in. I got you. Let's go do this. All right, so before we get into this, we're going to kind of talk about what this list is just a little bit, because this could be movies that were better the second time around, that you enjoyed more, that you didn't like at all the second time around. Films that fundamentally changed for you as the viewer for one reason or another on the second time that we watch this. So you essentially feel like you're watching a whole different movie this time. Whether you like that or whether you don't is a different story. So that's kind of the standard. That is the list. Let's count it down. All right, we're kicking off this list at number 10 with a film that I have tried rewatching many times. I get something different out of it every time. That might not be good and it might not be bad, but it is 2001's Donnie Darko. And we open with the countdown here, and I'm going to be honest with you, and that is, I like Donnie Darko way less than most people. And you got Richard Kelly directing Jake Gyllenhaal, who is a troubled teenager in 1988, and he begins to have visions and get information from a creepy man that he calls Frank in a costume that looks like a deranged rabbit that tells him the world's going to end in 28 days. And the film is a cult phenomenon. It flopped when it came out, and I understand why both counts. But I also think it's worth saying directly that Donnie Darko is a phenomenon that the director can never quite succinctly explain himself. Even Joe Bob Briggs has taken him to task for not being able to say what the hell his movie's actually about. But because of that, and because he's given multiple contradictory explanations about what this movie is about in interviews, that ambiguity has given space for people to put their own feelings, their own interpretation, their own depth into a movie that may not actually be there. And there's things about that I like. That's got a lot of David Lynch to it in that way, but David Lynch he never tried to explain what his movies were about. So he wasn't leaning into that. So you're bringing in things that might not actually be there, maybe seeing depth when it's not. And that's genuinely interesting in and of itself. But the second viewing of Donnie Darko is going to be very different, because not just because the truth is revealed, but because you're bringing your own interpretations into how you get to that truth in the story. And if your interpretation changes with what you see, then the second viewing of the film is going to be genuinely different than the first viewing of the film based on the experiences. And what this movie does, make you almost talk in circles. But that is either profound or it is a fascinating accident, or possibly both. Either way, I don't have tons of love for this film, but I kind of love the experience of watching people spin themselves up about it and of kind of digging into it and asking why. So Donnie Darko begins the countdown here, and it earns its place. It's genuinely rewatchable. It is weird as hell, and for that reason, it's here. It's going to be different each time you watch it, and that makes it a little bit more mysterious than most films on this list. All right, now next up we go to 2003 with what I think is the most underrated pick on this entire list. And I want to make sure this movie gets its proper recognition, because it doesn't have a 4K, it doesn't have any special releases, it was thrown out on DVD and is kind of forgotten about despite having an all-star cast, and it is a genuinely great film. It is 2003's Identity. This is directed by James Mangold, and you got John Cusack in here, Ray Liotta, Amanda Peet, a great ensemble cast in this movie of young actors who are immediately recognizable. And it starts with like 10 strangers who become stranded at a Nevada hotel during a just crazy thunderstorm, tons of rain, neon atmosphere in this movie, and then a serial killer begins eliminating them one by one. The first viewing of Identity is genuinely tense. It's tight. You're trying to uncover this slasher mystery of who's killing these people and why and what connects the people. They're all connected in some way, and the mystery builds beautifully to the reveal, which I'm not going to spoil here for anyone who hasn't seen it. And it's pretty satisfying. It kind of leaves me wanting in some ways. I kind of would maybe have ended it different, but you can't deny it's a good ending. But here's why Identity is here. The second viewing reveals James Mangold constructed every single character, every single interaction, every single death with the truth of the film already embedded into the narrative. Every detail was telling you something that you weren't really ready to hear yet, is basically what it is. The way that the characters each behave in the movie, the specific way that each character is introduced, that matters. The way the mystery unfolds matters. All of it's different when you know who these characters are and how it's actually going to end up and what it's about. Identity is a very underrated film overall. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. Let it be your first watch so that you can get to that second viewing. Then come back and you'll understand why it's here. And I mentioned him before, so now it's time to get to David Lynch with 2001's Mulholland Drive. And if you have seen Mulholland Drive and felt sort of genuinely disoriented after watching it and uncertain about what it was that you just actually watched, that is the correct response overall. That is what David Lynch intended. That's what he intended with most all of his films. Naomi Watts as Betty, a bright-eyed, aspiring actress coming to Hollywood. She befriends a mysterious woman who has lost her memory after a car accident on Mulholland Drive. The mystery of who this woman is, though, and what happened to her drives the first 2/3 of the film. If you're thinking about it on a surface level, it does anyway. And then there's like dreamlike momentum, dreamlike logic. It's like Sunset Boulevard mixed with nightmares, mixed with a little horror film, mixed with erotic thriller, mixed with mystery. It's genuinely compelling, especially when it doesn't make any sense. And here's something else I always tip people off on. If you're watching a David Lynch movie, if you look hard enough, you will find the devil himself in every single movie. So that's something to watch for on a rewatch. But the film shifts and everything you thought you were watching becomes something else entirely. And the second viewing of Mulholland Drive reveals that it's one of the most genuinely different rewatches on the list, because the first viewing is a mystery, the second viewing is a tragedy. Like a devastating tragedy about a woman who could not survive the gap between who she dreamed she was and who she actually was. And what tempted her and brought her along those paths. So it's who constructed the fantasy and who constructed that path of destruction that kind of created an idealized version of herself rather than facing reality. Every dreamlike sequence is confusing you on the first viewing. You're going to get something different afterwards. Disorienting mystery, a little supernatural tone underneath. Mulholland Drive deserves not only a second viewing, but many more, but it is going to be very different the second time you watch it than the first. Now we go to the horror aisle for one you may not expect to be here, and it is one of my top 3 favorite horror films of all time, at least top 5. No kidding. It's 2007's Trick or Treat. And this one is picked especially for people out there who love horror movies, but not just those people, because Trick or Treat is one of the great underseen horror films and just one of the greatest horror anthologies ever made. Very inspiring to me. And definitely of the last 20 years, it's one of the best, and it ain't even close. Michael Daughtry directing this, an anthology horror film that unfolds in a small town on Halloween night with out of order, sort of Pulp Fiction style, connecting stories that circle back in on themselves, that all revolve around one particular little trick-or-treater, little spirit of Halloween, Sam Hain himself. And the first viewing of Trick or Treat is just genuinely fun. You're just watching it. Each story is well constructed. The Halloween atmosphere, the colors, the costumes, the effects, all of that is there, and it is, you just feel it when you watch it. But the second viewing reveals something that the first viewing doesn't allow you to see fully, and that's that every story is happening simultaneously. And you may not have gotten that until at the end when it kind of wakes you up. That's that whole Pulp Fiction thing there, the way it goes out of order, but they are all happening at the same place at the same time, and that is very different. A car in the driveway, a figure crossing, things that you might have thought were at the beginning were actually at the end. They're all happening at the same time, and it is beautifully put together by Daughtry. Every frame matters, and I love that very much. The second viewing of Trick or Treat is essentially a completely different film because you understand how it is connected and how the things are happening. So Sam, the little burlap mask guy, becomes a genuinely mythological figure the second time you watch it, and you realize he might look like a puppet, but he may be the puppeteer pulling the strings. If you haven't seen Trick or Treat, go find it. Every viewing, you're going to find something a little extra, but it's very different from the first time to the second. All right, now we go to 1983 for Sleepaway Camp, and I just realized that I pulled Sleepaway Camp 2 off of my shelf instead of Sleepaway Camp, but that's fine. We're just going to roll with Sleepaway Camp. I want to talk about Sleepaway Camp carefully because, you know, this one's pretty controversial at the end, but the end is very, very, I want to say famous. We'll just go with famous. And I won't spoil that ending for anyone who maybe hasn't seen it, but the final image of Sleepaway Camp is one that will stay with you permanently once you've seen it. It's not really a jump scare. It's not a twist in the conventional sense. It's a revelation that completely recontextualizes the entire film from the first viewing. So if you go back and watch the second viewing of Sleepaway Camp, where you've got, you know, Angela Baker, she arrives at the camp and she's awkward and all these things are happening and it's like a summer camp slasher film and campers start dying. Well, once you've seen it once and you go back and you know Angela's story here, and the sequel is completely different, but, you know, I had to pick it up and it's cool art that we all love. But the second viewing, you know her story, you know the revelation, and man, that changes things a whole lot. You're watching a film then about something genuinely more complex overall, and the first viewing is a horror mystery of who's killing counselors and the old slasher trope. The second viewing is something else entirely once you know that. It is a very hot button issue in 1983. It was like, whoa, hold the phone. What did I just see happen right there? Sleepaway Camp is very carefully constructed and very different, I'm just going to say, on its second viewing. All right, next up is 1999's, we don't talk about it, but I guess we're going to have to talk about Fight Club. Now, another honest take on Fight Club. I like Fight Club less than most people. I actually probably like Donnie Darko better than Fight Club. We're going to talk about Fight Club again. We're going to break the rule of Fight Club. We're going to talk about it again on another video. David Fincher directing, Brad Pitt, Edward Norton. It's a very popular cult film. It became a cult object of the late 1990s into the early 2000s. And it's technically a good film. You know, some people say it's an extraordinary film, all that. Fincher is great. His direction is flawless in this. You've got men who are kind of arguing with each other about things that they need in life. But here's what you can't argue with. The second viewing of Fight Club is one of the great cinematic rewatches available because Fincher hid the truth in the film to start with if you knew where to look, but on the second viewing the cat's out of the bag and you know this, and then it becomes a whole other film, and not necessarily in the good way. The first viewing of Fight Club is a story about two men. The second viewing of Fight Club is a completely different story about one man. So it completely changes it. The gap between those two experiences is nuts. And no matter how you feel about the film's larger argument, there's parts of this that are technically extraordinary. Personally, slightly overrated. To me, overhyped. You might see that on a sequel to a very popular video I just did recently. But Fight Club fundamentally changes from the first viewing to the second, so it had to be on this list. And then there is 2001's The Others with Nicole Kidman starring as Grace in here, who's a deeply religious woman with her two photosensitive, they're like sensitive to light children. They live in a darkened house, a darkened old manor. It's constantly foggy and things outside in Jersey in like 1940s. And she's waiting on her husband to return from war. Three mysterious servants arrive out of nowhere. Strange things begin to happen, and Grace becomes increasingly convinced that her house is haunted. The Others is one of the most like beautifully sort of constructed and shot horror films, particularly haunted house horror films out there. Definitely in the last 25 years, it is up there. The atmosphere in this movie it oozes off of it in waves. The performances are great. Nicole Kidman runs the house like a ship captain. She even refers to the house as like a ship on here. And it's a crafted, well-done ghost story on the first viewing. The second viewing is a completely different genre because what is being constructed here by the director, and you can see it clearly on a rewatch, is a film where every detail is telling you the truth. It's hiding in plain sight from the beginning of the movie. The way the servants behave, the way Grace's religious conviction is what it's protecting her from. You know, all this, the way her children respond to the environment. Every scene plays differently when you know what Grace and her children actually are and the story behind it. The Others does something specific to earn its number 4 placement here. The emotional experience of the second viewing is not just different, it is devastating. Way more than the first time you watch this film, because Grace is fighting desperately to protect her children from something she fundamentally misunderstands. And the gap between what she believes is happening and what is happening is heartbreaking. I mean, it's just soul crushing. And it is very different from the first time you watch it to the second. Is genuinely one of the most different rewatch viewing experiences available. The Others. All right, now you know we couldn't have this list without jumping to 1982 and John Carpenter's The Thing. I mean, come on. The Thing has to be on here. I've talked about The Thing on this channel many times. One of the best movies ever made. One of the best horror movies, sci-fi movies ever made. And I'm talking about it again because it's one of the greatest films in the history of American cinema. I don't care what anybody says, but the second viewing of this movie changes the conversation completely. Like, look, this one was misunderstood in its time. It flopped at the time. You got Kurt Russell in a remote Antarctic facility, and you've got a shape-shifting alien organism, and you've got 12 dudes who cannot trust each other because any one of them could be the Thing. The first viewing of The Thing is a great paranoia experience, one of the best in cinema. Who is the Thing? What happened? Who can you trust? The tension of not knowing is just genuinely unbearable. Like, it is tension ratcheted up to 11. But here's what makes The Thing extraordinary on a second viewing, and that's why it's this high on this list. I could have put it at number 1, but we could always put The Thing at number 1. The second viewing of The Thing is not about discovering who the Thing is, because that debate's going to go on forever, especially how it ends. You already know who and when they are the Thing. The second viewing is about watching the characters who don't know, what's going on, watching them fail to figure it out, watching them literally be human beings, and the anticipation. Now you know who's the Thing, so you know who is in danger at any given time, and that changes it completely. You're watching these smart, capable men, and you're almost like, oh, don't do that. You know, you're because now you know. And so the first time you're going through it with them, you have that experience. The second time you know, and you're worried for them, and the tension is a completely different way. And that is a very different experience than anything else on this list. Watching people make fatal mistakes when you know it's coming and there's nothing you can do about it after you figured it out is very different. So the viewings of this movie change, particularly from the first to the second, but as many times as you watch it, you can watch the ending countless times and try to pull out something different. Who's the thing? Is McCready the thing? Is Childs the thing? Is neither the thing? Are both the thing? Which one is the thing? As a filmmaker, the thing I return to with this film so much is how often I think about the genuine sustained tension, and that is harder to do than you realize, especially when the tension changes depending on how many times you've viewed the film. It's one of the best American films ever made. It belongs on this list. The Thing by John Carpenter. And here we are at the top two, and we go to 1995 for The Usual Suspects. Now, Bryan Singer directed this. You've got Kevin Spacey as Verbal Kent, a small-time con man with a limp and a stutter who's a sole survivor of a massacre on a harbor in San Pedro. And he sits across from a customs agent, like an FBI guy, and tells a story of how he and 4 other criminals came to be on this boat where this massacre happened. The story involves a mythical crime lord named Kaiser Sose, a man so dangerous and so invisible that most people in the criminal world aren't even sure he exists. He's like the boogeyman, kind of. The Usual Suspects is one of the most perfectly, and I mean perfectly, constructed mystery films ever made. The first viewing is genuinely gripping crime thriller that builds up one of the greatest twist endings in the history of cinema. And then you watch it again, and the entire film reassembles itself in a completely different way, because now you know all the clues. You know how it ends up, so you can find the clues, and you're like, oh my God, I should have seen that the whole time. There it was, right in front of my face. The coffee cup, the bulletin board, the specific details of Verbal Kent's story that don't quite add up or add up too perfectly in all these different moments for you to know, and you should have known, and you're like kicking yourself at the end. That's what makes it so fun. And on a second viewing, you get to unravel the mystery in a whole different way, and that makes it so much fun. The Usual Suspects is at number 2, and the film makes the strongest argument that Kaiser Sose is the greatest unreliable narrator in the history of cinema. 100%. Look up, if you don't know what that is, an unreliable narrator in film, look it up. He's got to be at the top of the list. And if you think it should be number 1, you probably got a good argument, but I want to hear that in the comments, because number 1, maybe you'll see this coming, maybe you won't. Maybe when you rewatch this video, you'll kick yourself and you should have seen number 1 coming, but Usual Suspects comes in at number 2. Now at number 1, we go to 1999, and I just have one thing to tell you. I see dead people. That's right, it's The Sixth Sense. Look, it had to be here. M. Night Shyamalan, Bruce Willis, Haley Joel Osment in here. Cole tells Malcolm something that became one of the most famous lines in cinema history. I see dead people. And on the first viewing of The Sixth Sense, it is a masterclass in sustained dread of not knowing what's going on, genuine emotional investment into characters. Shyamalan builds the whole mystery of Cole's condition with a lot of patience that he maybe didn't show in other, that he tried to recreate this many times, and he never could recreate this because it's that perfect. In 1999, the ending of this movie, the surprise, the reveal shocked people, and then you watch it again, and The Sixth Sense is number 1 on this list. And it's not really a debate, because no other film on this list, no other film in cinema history really is more completely and more fundamentally different on a second viewing than The Sixth Sense. Every single scene is different. Not some scenes, not the scenes directly involving the twist. Literally every scene in the entire film is different when you know the truth of Malcolm's situation. The scene where Malcolm sits at a dinner table with his wife, the scene where he tries to open the basement door, the scene where he sits in the waiting room, every conversation he has with Cole, every moment he interacts or fails to interact with the world around him is different the second time you watch the movie. Shyamalan constructed the film so meticulously that every single frame, there is no cheat, there is no moment where the film breaks its own rules to surprise you or subvert expectations. Every rule was established in the first scene and honored in every subsequent scene. That is a very high level of craft. Two things being true in each scene at the same time, different meanings, is extraordinary. It's one of the most technically difficult things to do as a filmmaker. And like I said, Shyamalan himself tried to recreate this and he never really could because it's that elevated. The first viewing of The Sixth Sense is a ghost story. The second is kind of a heartbreaking, tragic love story about a man who couldn't let go, and he still, no matter what, wanted to help people, and the boy who helps him find peace along the way. They are not the same film. The first time and the second time you watch them, they share the same frames, they share the same sequence, but they do not resemble each other once you've watched it one time. That is crazy. It is awesome. And that is why The Sixth Sense is number one. So there you go. 10 films: Donnie Darko, Identity, Fight Club, Mulholland Drive, Usual Suspects, Trick or Treat, Sleepaway Camp, The Others, The Thing. Great movies, right? That change. Well, some of them I don't like as much as others, but they definitely change from one viewing to the next. There's no denying that. So go rewatch one tonight or watch it for the first time so that you can get to that second viewing, and drop it in the comments. Let me know what you think. Which ones do you agree with? Which film on this list changed the most for you the second time you watched it? And which film do you believe should have been on here that maybe I didn't get? Maybe I can do another list because there's plenty of films like this. I already know you have some opinions about Usual Suspects being on here. Maybe should have been one, maybe should have been two. Donnie Darko, there's a lot. So you guys let me know all about it down there. And hey, if you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, hit the hype button. All that stuff helps out the channel. We just crossed 50,000 and we are trying to hit 100,000 by the end of 2026. A lofty goal, but you can help me get there. And y'all, I really do appreciate it. I love talking movies with you. We do it all here. Lists, recommendations, new movie reviews, big essays, deep dive, nostalgia, documentary style videos, holidays, all that, because all of it is pop culture. All of it shaped us and the movies and pop culture that we love. And if that sounds like something you'd like to support a little bit more, my Patreon link is down in the description, and there you'll get your name and lights on every video, but you'll find special videos, behind the scenes looks at my filmmaking, members only discussion, 4K physical media reviews, and so much more. And everything helps the channel, and I really do appreciate it. But until next time, be kind, rewind like always. It's Chase with AV Pop Culture, and I'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.